It's official, it's happening. The God Valley incident is here, and what may be one of the most awaited crossovers in One Piece history is about to take place. But of course, the nature of this crossover includes a mountain of different characters from many different factions, including some characters you may have forgotten about or you may not even have realized. So let's properly review every single individual, faction, event, and every single thing you need to know before heading into the mini arc that is God Valley. On the cover, Yamato decides to head back to the flower capital. The business around the country concluded. Ulti and Page 1 follow along, all of them eating apples, or Ringo, the namesake of the Ringo region, named after their real-life counterpart in Aomori, Tohoku, where apples are a local delicacy. I've tried a bunch of them, and believe me, I never knew there were so many different kinds of apple flavors. These apples also serve, however, as a strong symbolism for the change of Wano, as we saw Tama eating an apple as Luffy fed her, and without the people of Ebisu were forced to eat the bad apples that are smile fruits. Next to them is Onimaru, who appears to be doing well at a strong 69 years, while behind them we can see the castle of Ringo has seemingly been restored after its destruction. On a rainy night in Hachinosu, a turbulent incident took place. As we had anticipated, Shaki, the treasurer of Hachinosu, was stolen by the government. Don Marlon, gang of West Blue, who had been guarding her, is killed in the dead of night, a crime scene you'd usually expect from a mobster like him. This explains why we hadn't heard much of him at present, because he died before even the God Valley incident could have even taken place. Eventually, the epithet of gang would be taken up by a young muscle man by the name of Capone Beige, who was only 3 years old at the time, though whether he and Marlon are actually connected or he simply took up the name is yet to be seen. And this panel makes it clear that the traitor was Otoku, who received a large payment in exchange. This isn't really surprising, as he was one of our top candidates, mostly for two reasons we've mentioned. For one, he will end up becoming the Commodore of Hachinosu, taking the position after Jabek died and maintaining it for decades until Teach would steal it back during the Rocky Port incident during the time skip. So he had the most to benefit from the rocks falling out in the end, and it seems he didn't even go to God Valley himself, as he later mentions finding the source of this information to be quite shady and unreliable, ironically enough, obviously trying to avoid getting involved, and as Jabek said, those who didn't want to follow stayed on the island. This explains why both he and Marlon were not present at God Valley. Considering most of the crew went to and fell apart at God Valley, Ochaku got to reap all the benefits by taking control of Pirate Island. Beyond that though, if he really is the father of Caribou, then frankly we can assume that he's just as trustable of an individual, so it's not a shocker that he would betray Jabek. But at the same time, Caribou also is now wishing to work under Blackbeard at Hachinosu, so I wonder if a similar betrayal might happen again, or if he is different from his father. We also see Gloriosa crying, which makes sense because in her case, Shaki was her own younger sister. Pirates all around the world also became dejected to the point of causing an economic damage to the world as a result of the distress. Among them we see of course Roger and Rayleigh, but you might not realize that he is so angry that Roger is literally emanating Conqueror's Haki, as we see indicated by the black lightning bolts and the body beady body sound effect of cracking thunder just above him. We hop a year forward to the incident itself, 30 years ago on God Valley. We see that Garling had in fact tricked and deceived his lover rather than taken her by force, as I had first wrongly assumed. But as others have pointed out, it's not that Garling ever seriously fell in love with her, but rather he liked toying and messing around with her like a hunter toying with his prey, something that is pretty typical of the God Knights at this point, making her believe that he legitimately loved her only to discard her life without the slightest regard. But you can tell how manipulative the relationship already was when the woman had to literally tell Garling, "I'm begging you, live with me on this island," showing that she was already used to being one having to ask and beg for something as simple as living together, rather than being a more natural discussion between them. Indeed, as we imagined, Garling disposed of the very woman he impregnated with his own hands, taking her children for himself and assigned to get a higher class wife, who we can connect the dots to be Shaki, likely why she was kidnapped, with Garling deeming none other than the woman who was arguably treated to be the most popular woman alive to be his wife. And of course, by wife in Celestial Dragon terms, that means his personal slave. The disgusting horror of the genocide tournament is just starting, as the Marines barricade and surround the island, just like we had seen in Kuma's flashback, creating a blockade that makes it impossible to escape from the island. Citizens panic, unaware of what is going to happen to them, even fearing for the safety of their kids. The Marines are given orders to capture all citizens, and if anyone resists, they are shot with tranquilizer rounds, as the killing should be left up to the celestial dragons. Among the Marines, we see a lieutenant commander, someone clearly not very high ranking, as that is basically Helmappa's position, and we don't even know if this is a Marine HQ soldier, but even under him is a very humble new recruit by the name of Monkey D. Dragon. At this point, Dragon is only 17 years old, about the same age Luffy was when he became a pirate. He resembles a bit a younger Luffy though, especially when in Gear 4th. As we were told, Dragon had briefly joined the Marines, as he was likely convinced by his father to become one, just like he tried to make Luffy a Marine too. Dragon however quit soon after joining because he felt disillusioned with the cruelty of the government. Many of us assumed, given the timeline, that he likely was at God Valley as a result, and indeed this is the very moment his worldview was changed, and one of the biggest threats to the government began to rise, leading him to form the Freedom Fighters and later the Revolutionary Army. However, this also explains how Garp knew about God Valley when Kong mentioned it was so confidential, as he may have heard it from his own son, but it's also possible he might have heard it from someone else too. If you look at Dragon's arm, you can also spot what looks like a tattoo, rather than a bandana given the color, on his arm, which looks exactly like the mark he would later get on his face. This makes sense, as we've never actually seen Dragon with short sleeves, always wearing that long cape. Next we got to see a Marine prison ship, which unlike normal Marine ships, is reinforced with a dark hull, as its purpose is to escort prisoners, or in this case, slaves, to add to the genocide tournament. Among them we see Genie, who, as we were told in the viewer cards, is a native of the Porco Kingdom, a country in the Grand Line, though likely not one affiliated by the government, since they tend to take slaves from those kinds of countries, but she also could have been a victim in some other circumstance, having been taken as a slave at age 4. As we see here, she calls Ivankov Aniki, or brother, but we still don't know for sure if the two are related by blood, or simply became siblings as slaves by relying on each other. As we were told in God Valley, Genie is a very talented at communications, a skill I wonder where she picked up, considering she's been a slave since age 4, but she used it to sneak into the communications room and send what seems like a Morse code signal to her informant, informing of what will be found at God Valley once the tournament starts in some days' time. Back at the slave room, which as we see is in very poor living conditions, the two reunite, and of course Ivankov is as lively as ever, snapping as he claims, "Don't underestimate miracles," tying into his narrative of miracles as we see later in the story. As a result of these, we can hear the Marines retaliating, as the sound effect "gashan," like a plays on screen, which sounds like the cracking of a whip, being whipped for making noise, though thankfully they were not caught. Kuma looks from a distance, not yet being acquainted with Eva-chan. On another side of the seas, we see the informant visiting the Cypher Pole Intelligence Bureau, which seems to be a location for managing and receiving information by the Cypher Pole. We're told during Annie's lobby that each of the 8 Cypher Police departments have special bases at specific places in the world, with CP9 having their special headquarters at Annie's lobby. This is likely one of those bases, though the lack of number seems to suggest this is more of a general base meant to manage information. Its appearance is like that of a castle, not too different from Annie's lobby in some regards, and with a world government symbol on it. Funnily, the 2 clocks show different hours, but I wonder if that's intentional. The informant in question in this case turns out to be Morgans, who demands a ransom from the Cypher Pole for keeping secret about the events of the genocide tournament he heard from Genie. As the intelligence officers mention, Morgans is just a kid in charge of a small regional newspaper, which lines up with what we knew from the viewer cards, where we were told that Morgans founded the World Economic Newspaper, but at the same time we were also told that he's also only 53 years old, meaning that during the incident he was only 15 years old, which felt weird, but we are told here that no, he was definitely quite the young entrepreneur. It's possible that the newspaper we saw previously before in the flashback were by different companies before Morgans really became the lead player in the market, market, primarily as he introduced the new SKU system, allowing for faster delivery of news than before, where they likely may have been shipped through traditional means like ships rather than by bird. This is assuming that a 10-year-old Morgans wasn't handling the news. His domestication of birds may have been held by his Toritorinomi or Berber fruit model Albatross, a fruit he already had at this point, as he evidently appears to be, since he prefers keeping his true identity secret due to having too many enemies. Though I have to wonder if he could be someone we know or if we'll even ever see his real face. Morgans accepts the bribe to keep it a secret, so he doesn't publish about it in the newspapers, but instead does send information about it to Hachinosu alone. The reason is that he just wants to see newsworthy material happen, because he's going to benefit from great articles if an incident of God Valley's proportions would take place, and indeed we do see his article later during Kuma's flashback. The people of Pirate Island are relieved to hear this news though, with even the school itself getting hearts in its eyes, with each of them reacting in different ways. Gloriosa is ecstatic to hear her sister is alive, while Stussy thinks about the movements of the Marines, as she's one of the few here that doesn't have as much interest in taking Shaki back. Meanwhile, Captain John, Ganzui and Shiki are freaking out, with Shiki even screaming out Shaki-chuan like Sanji would. As we saw from Strong World, he's definitely got a thing for strong women, that's for sure. More fittingly, Whitebeard focuses on the genocide tournament, which he had thought to be nothing more than a hoax, disgusted by the inhuman practice of human hunting. Lilin instead thinks of the Dal fruits, since she has not much interest in Shaki, wishing to give one of them to one of her children, but comments it to Kaido, who she eventually gave the Uonomi model Seryudu to seeing him like a little brother. Napoleon on her head also looks at the paper with interest. Stroisen is skeptic that this could be a trap, but Jabak says that they are going anyway, and anyone who is scared, Ochoku with a good excuse, can stay behind. Though of course we know that Jabak had different ideas. This better contextualizes the scene at God Valley with the Rocks pirates. Most of them were indeed going after Shaki, with Whitebeard claiming that Jabak is losing sight of the goal. But this is because Jabak had a different goal all along. Big Mom instead was indeed talking about seizing the fruits, but either Kaido misunderstood her wanting Shaki when she has no reason to, or he did realize she wanted the fruits, but wondered whether she had any use for them when she already had one. But in reality, she wanted them for her children. Katakuri already had his fruit by now, but we would have looked at an alternate timeline where someone like Oven got the dragon fruit. At the same time though, all the rest were definitely focused on Shaki, as were others like the Roger pirates, who we see heard of the information as well. This was likely thanks to Spencer, the informant of the Roger pirates, who would have been able to hear the details from some contact at Pirate Island, especially as Roger heard of rocks moving as well. Roger asks Gaban to get to God Valley, as he is after all the navigator, and really, Seagull, Mr. Momota, and Don Kino cheer him on. As a result, like we were told, Garp is also told about it, and he too heads to God Valley, in a scene that is taken directly from chapter 1096. We need a reminder that we are still in the Alba flashback though, and so Harald and Jabak cross paths at sea. We were told they wouldn't meet again until the time of the incident, but it seems this is what the narrator meant rather than Harald being on God Valley himself. However, before squaring off, Harald is willing to listen Jabak out, separate from his crew, which includes Shiki, Kyo, and even what appears to be Gil Bastar next to them, the protagonist of Oda's one-shot, which he mentioned was a member of the Rocks Pirates in the latest SBS. Jabak drops a massive reveal though. His real name is not Rocks, rather it's Davy D. Jabak. This means that his son isn't just Rocks D. Teach, who likely took his mother's name as Marshall D. Teach, but in fact his real name would be Davy D. Teach. And the original legendary pirate was in fact not Davy Jones, but Davy D. Jones, a member of the D clan who is so dangerous to the government that they tried to erase his entire plotline, even beyond his association with being a D clan member. As a quick refresher, Davy Jones, inspired by the real-life fictional figure, was described by Robin as such. There's an island out there in the sea considered to be a paradise for pirates. They call it Pirate Island. On that island long ago, a game was born. It is said that, to get their hands on the best seafarers, pirates would use this game to steal other pirates. Davy Jones was a pirate from long ago who had been cursed by the devil to live in the depths of the sea floor, where it is said he yet lives to this day. Or so the legend goes. All ships or treasures that sink to the sea floor would become his
his possessions as boats swaying as they would sink into his locker. Davy's name is associated with possessing all that sinks, so pirates called stealing others from your enemy as Davy back.
We don't know much more than that the Davy back fight was named after this famous reputation of this famous pirate, but Davy Jones himself was said to have been killed by the devil, who we can assume most likely was Emu and cursed to live on the seafloor, which might relate to the sinking of the world. And since Jabak did tell Emu that he was an adorer of Davy Jones, he clearly was teasing him in some form that he was going to come back and fulfill what the original Davy could not. But since Emu was not able to touch Jabak all this time despite trying to kill him, that basically meant nothing, but it did put a target on Jabak's family. Either way, the figure of Davy Jones at this point, I'm very much starting to assume, may have very well been the Jabak or Teach of Joy Boy's time. However, Jones's family would survive, hiding in the dark side of the world, thus explaining the special lineage that Saturn talked about regarding Teach, relating to Davy Jones. Indeed, Jabak would end up having his own kid, Davy D Teach, but to protect him, he would send him and his mother to his own hometown, where other members of the Davy clan in hiding would help take care of them. That homeland, however, happens to be God Valley. That certainly explains a lot of things, but it shows that Jabak is simply using Shaki as an excuse, instead wishing to save his own wife and kid, but feels that a great fate has been set in motion, thus giving the title of the chapter Island of Fate, a fitting mention given how Teach too would often speak of fate. Jabak asks Harold to help him one last time, already foreseeing that he might lose here, but Harold cannot bring himself to help him. Something that, if he had joined him, would have changed the events of history forever. However, it seems that Harold can bring himself to bring Jabak down either, so instead he simulates an attack on his ship, so that Jabak can get away, but he can save face against the government. However, the government would still blame Harold, as we saw Summers and Emo blaming Harold for his mistake, as not only did it result in the God Valley incident reaching such levels of destruction, but also in Elbaf not joining the government, as their conditions were not fulfilled. And so the day of the God Valley incident finally starts for good, as we see the horrors of the genocide tournament being put on full display. The prizes include several coffers, including the one where Shanks would be hidden inside of, but also a set of unique sleighs serving as either hunts or prizes. Inside of the chest there should be devil fruits, at least the Nikyu Nikyu Nomi that would be eaten by Kuma, and the Uo Uo Nomi Model Seiryu that would be eaten by Kaido. Though I wonder if the other chests also had other valuables that aren't fruits, given how there's like 9 of them here, unlike though the 6 that we saw during Kuma's flashback, but I wonder if there's a reason for it or if this is a mistake. But the crown jewel has to be Shaki herself, the treasure Hachinosu Gar mentioned being stolen all the way back in 1096, being offered to the winner of the tournament. We already know that the champion of God Valley would end up being Garling, as we were told so during his introduction, originally mistranslated as King of God Valley, but this term was rather champion. And indeed we see that Garling had her ordered up so he could attain her as his wife during the tournament, even showing off to try and win her, though Summers also appears here wanting her as a slave. Interestingly, Summers looks a lot younger here, just like Garling, showing that he did age in spite of his immortality, suggesting that the immortality was only granted to him later, despite both he and Garling being god knights. Alongside them though, we also see Gunko and the blue-haired member of the Manmeyer family that we saw in Kuma's flashback, which makes sense as Gunko's full name is Saintess Manmeyer Gunko, though I do hope we get this girl's name as well. Unlike her other fellows, she doesn't seem to have aged a day, aside from her long hair also sporting a more knightly outfit. Hopefully this time she wears pants too. Interestingly, Gunko's outfit and hair length here matches that which we see in her flashback of crying out "Father" when she regains her memories. It seems that families do compete against each other as a form of prestige beyond an individual champion in what can be translated as the clan battle, which explains the claim mentioned by the Manmeyer family member. We see a couple more glimpses of a couple other locations. First, we see Dragon stumbling upon a woman bleeding out. It's hard to say who this is given how small the panel is, but she does say, "Help my children escape from the island. I don't want that person to have them." Context here would infer that this might be Shanks and Shamrock's mother, which would make sense if perhaps Dragon played a hand in helping Shanks escape by locking him in a chest, although Shamrock would eventually end in Garling's hands. This mother's wish, however, changing the landscape of the future of the world, as Shanks would end up being adopted by Roger instead. Though I have to wonder if we have other members of the Davy clan, if Buggy could somehow be involved as well. On the other, we see a young Teach, only 2 years old, being comforted by his mother, who we don't see as well, but I wonder how much resemblance she will bear to Oda's previous sketches of Blackbeard's mother. And I wonder if the idea of Teach having a younger sister will be scrapped entirely as a forgotten idea in Oda's notes as we saw it, or if she will make an appearance here too. The fact that Jebek only mentioned a kid, seemingly in the singular, would suggest that she's been scrapped, but maybe we can still see her among the Davy family members. As indeed we do have confirmation, in case we couldn't have already assumed, that the Davy family was the secret thing Garling found at God Valley, which is why the boss, Emu, would be satisfied by this find, as Emu had been trying to raise this lineage for so long. Beyond the Buccaneer, that is Kuma being one of the SR rabbits, SR meaning super rare and rabbit being the name given to all the slaves running away, the other are the members of the Davy bloodline, a bloodline that has survived for the past 800 years, confirming that Davy Jones was in fact a major player in the Void Century. So as we head into the God Valley incident, let's recap all the relevant information by starting with the full cast of the event. First, there's the native inhabitants of the island, which include the citizens of God Valley, including the king who is swiftly killed by Garling, and among them there are some members of the Davy D clan, though from what we are told in Kuma's flashback, these seem to only amount to 12 people. Among them there's Jebek's wife and his son, Teach, who is only 2 years old, though again, Jebek's wife probably isn't a Davy herself. Among the citizens there's Shanks' mom, alongside of course her babies Shanks and Shamrock, who was stabbed by Garling but seemingly survived long enough to tell Dragon to save her children, although I'd imagine she died shortly after. And there's also a possibility she too could be a member of the Davy D clan, but it's also possible she was just an ordinary citizen of the island. Among the imported slaves, we of course have the SR rabbit Bartholomew Kuma, who would on this island join forces with Emporio Vankov and Genie, who is responsible for letting the information leak through Morgans. Among native citizens and slaves, a total of about 100,000 rabbits are found on the island. Among them there are 150 R rabbits or rare rabbits and 13 SR rabbits or super rare rabbits, which means that putting the one Kuma aside, there must be 12 members of the Davy D clan on the island. Shakuyaku has also been brought as a slave, though it seems that she's not a rabbit but rather left as a prize for the winner of the tournament. The occupying party involves 200 celestial dragons, as well as their marine escorts protecting the island, though aside from a young cadet dragon, we don't really know of any other specific named marines here so far. Among the celestial dragons, we know that at least Saturn was on the island, and among the god knights we see Garling, now Summers and Gunko, as well as the unnamed blue-haired Manmayer, though it isn't clear if she specifically is a god knight or just a celestial dragon. And the two other knights seen alongside Garling, including the blonde with long hair and the one with the skull mask. Other unnamed include the one with the mask or the other one with purple hair. With the invading party of the Rock Spirits, we have Rox D. Jebek, Edward Newgate, Shiki, Stussy, Ganzui, Linlin, accompanied by Stroysen, Napoleon, Zeus, and Prometheus, Kaido, Captain John, Silver Axe Kyo, Gloriosa, Barbell, and Jill Bastar. From what we see, it seems Ochoku sent this one out to reap the benefits. Jebek intends to rescue his wife and kid, Big Mom and partially Kaido are interested in the Del Fruits, while the rest are mostly focused on saving Shaki. Beyond the Rock Pirates, many other pirate crews from Hachinosu and other islands were also said to have come to save Shaki and being involved in the incident. Joining those crews, however, is also the Roger Pirates, which includes Roger, Rayleigh, Gaban, and of course the whole rest of the name crew as we know it. Going to rescue Shaki, though at this point Roger, who seems to have given up on her, is most likely doing it both due to the long friendship he's built with her and for the sake of Rayleigh as well, but most of the crew seems unaware of that. Because Roger went to the island though, Garp followed suit and arrived shortly after with Bogard in tow as well. What the news tells us of this event, through the words of Morgans, who seemingly got a big breakthrough hit through this incident, is that Garp defeated the Rock Pirates at God Valley, and so came to be known as the hero of the Marines. But as Sengoku told us, the truth is that Garp joined hands with Roger to take down the Rock Pirates, with Jebek himself supposedly dying and the crew mostly scattering apart. However, in doing so, Garp unwillingly protected the Celestial Dragons, which Sengoku mentioned is a point that shamed him for a long time to come, though we don't know the full details quite yet. Among the survivors of the Rock Pirates, Newgate, Shiki, Stussy, Linlin, Stroisen, Kaido, and Gloriosa survived and escaped, though Linlin gave Kaido the Uo no Mimo del Seiryu, so she may have assisted in his escape that way. Among them though, Shebek, Captain John, Ganzui, and Jill Bastar would all die on the island, with the latter three being later stolen and turned into zombies by Gecko Moria. We don't know what the fates of Barbel and Kyo were, but many speculate they were zombies on Thriller Bark as well and may have died too. Kuma ate the Nikyu Nikyunomi and was able to save himself, Ivankov, Genie, and another 500 slaves after a short encounter with Saturn. But it's likely the remaining 99,500 slaves in God Valley may have likely ultimately perished as well, unless they were saved somehow. Teach must also have survived among them, though we don't know yet how he did so or with who, considering he was only 2 years old. There likely were some Celestial Dragon casualties, but all the named ones we know of did survive, and Garling took Shamrock with him, though Shanks instead ended up inside a treasure chest that Roger would steal instead, likely after Dragon's interference. It's maybe even possible that the chest that Dragon put Shanks inside of may have even contained his fruit. And while we don't know, I'd personally assume that it would be the Roger pirates ultimately who would rescue Shaki and help her escape, with Rayleigh in particular probably ending up saving her. Ultimately, the island of God Valley would allegedly vanish without a trace, leaving others to wonder if it was destroyed, evaporated, turned into Thriller Bark, or whatever other thing that may have happened to it. The Rocks pirates would eventually go on to form their own crews, with Whitebeard and Shiki leading the next era under Roger and later Whitebeard, Kaido and Big Mom the following era during the Great Pirate Era, and even later the figures of Shanks, Teach, and Buggy if he somehow still has any connection with this incident or the Davy clan. The secrets of God Valley, however, were lost to the currents of history, but hopefully we can now shed some more light on them as we get to experience the moment when destiny was set in motion.